Hello and welcome to Syndicate Gaming. My name is Jim, and today we're doing something very special that I've wanted to do for a little while now, and that's talk about all the different miniatures games that I've played, and we're gonna discuss them in detail and then rank them in a tier list of how I personally feel about them. So obviously this list will be fairly subjective, but I'm going to try to give objective facts and provide some insight maybe for new people or anybody that's looking to switch up games because I have played all 10 of these games here. As you can see, most of them are Warhammer or Marvel or Star Wars. There's a couple other ones mixed in there, but I've been doing this hobby for a long time. I first joined it when I was like 10 or 11 playing Warhammer 40,000. I probably played it completely wrong. But that's not the point, right? The point is that I've been in this hobby for most of my life at this point. So I just wanted to share how I feel about things and see what other people think. I know there's going to be a lot of people that disagree with me. That's totally fine. Feel free to let me know down in the comments. And let's just get started, shall we? So I want to start out. First of all, here, I'll just say all 10 games we're doing. We're going to be doing the Song of Ice and Fire miniatures game, Warhammer Age of Sigmar, Marvel Crisis Protocol, Star Wars Legion, Warhammer 40,000, Star Wars Armada, Warhammer the Horus Heresy, Star Wars Shatterpoint, Middle-earth strategy battle game, and then Warhammer Age of Sigmar Warcry. So, obviously, there's a lot of games I have not played. There's some of those games like Conquest, Infinity, Malifaux that are very popular, but I personally have not played them. They're games that I know about. I have friends that play them, but I don't feel comfortable rating them not having been a part of that community and hobby, right? So, sorry about anybody that was looking forward to those, but I'm just talking about what I'm familiar with. So, I want to go over some of the criteria of where I'm going to be ranking these games, right? Like, how are we judging them? And first of all, they're all miniatures games. So I think that's going to be one of the biggest factors, right? It's like, how are the miniatures? Are they high quality? Are they plastic? Are they resin? So on and so forth. And that'll be different for every game, right? I'm going to talk about the setting and the theme. There's Marvel games, Star Wars games, Warhammer games. All of that factors in, right? The gameplay. This is going to be the widest margin between the games, I think, because I think some games play really well, some games play poorly. The cost of entry. So this hobby just naturally has a high cost of entry because you need paint, spray paint, clippers, and then the miniatures themselves. You might need to purchase rules for certain games, but each game has a different level of what it's costing you to get started in it, right? We're going to be talking about if you can buy the miniatures or not, because some of these games have awesome stuff. You just can't get them, and that's obviously a problem. Long-term support, one or two of these games on the list have lost support recently, so that's obviously an issue. I'm going to be talking about the community. So this one is, I think this is one of the most subjective parts of this is like when I joined that game's community, what happened to me? What was my like play experience. So that's obviously going to vary between people, right? But that's all stuff we're going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the game's balance. And then finally, any apps or list builders that are involved with the game, right? Because that's always nice to have, makes it easier to play the game. All right, with that out of the way, let's go straight into our first game, the Song of Ice and Fire miniatures game. So, this game is obviously based on the Game of Thrones or Song of Ice and Fire universe. Specifically, it's based on the books. So there are characters in this game that are not in the show. So if you've only seen the show and you go look at the rules or characters for this game, you're going to see stuff and be like, what is that? I don't know what that is. It's because it's all based on the books, right? Um, so out of the 10 games here, this is the only game that uses like movement trays or is called a rank and flank kind of game where you have an entire unit and they move 6 inches, 10 inches, whatever it may be, and then they rotate and they move again. And you get bonuses for hitting the enemy in the flank or rear. So that's cool. That's an aspect that I did quite enjoy. I didn't think I would, but it turned out to be a pretty satisfying system. And I think that this is a fun game to play, right? So actually, I bought the starter set that was the Starks versus Lannisters, I think during COVID. So I got the miniatures. I took them out of the box. There's zero assembly. Like you literally just take them out of plastic tray or container and then put them on the table, put them in the tray, which is nice for some people, right? But that means you're going to have a pretty serious drop in quality of the miniatures. And I think that's an issue for this game. Like, those Starks versus Lannisters that I personally had were some of the oldest miniatures in the game, and since then they've gotten better. But just that process of how they make the miniatures just doesn't let them get as much detail as some of these other games, right? Because you don't build it yourself. But anyways, I was able to just take the miniatures out of the packaging and play a game with my wife, and my wife and I picked it up really easily, and we had a good time. I think she crushed me with the Starks. I think the Stark cavalry like charged into the rear of my Lannisters and just routed them all. Um, so yeah, the game is quite fun. The setting is obviously fantastic if you like Game of Thrones. There's a fantasy element, but there's, soldiers on the ground, right? And I think one of one of the issues with the gameplay for me is that it's in the Game of Thrones universe, right? But it's primarily about the units themselves. So it's like I have a unit of Lannister guardsmen and they're joined by Jaime Lannister. And what Jaime Lannister does is he gives that unit a buff or some kind of benefit. And then if he's my commander, he allows me three like command cards that have a much larger influence on the game. But ultimately, you're not really playing with Jaime Lannister, right? Like he's just in a group of guys, and I don't particularly care about 12 random Lannister guardsmen, right? Like I want to play as Jaime Lannister. So I think that takes a hit for it. Uh, there is a video on my channel about Song of Ice and Fire Tactics that's coming out, which is a skirmish-based version of this game. Well, actually, it's a totally different game, but it's in the same universe, same people that make the game, and it's much more character focused. So I'm gonna find myself playing that game more than likely. Like just finished the Kickstarter and I purchased everything except Rogon. Well, I purchased everything that was Kickstarter only, because you can always get the other stuff in the future. But anyways, I think this is also the only game that has like an active command hand. Like, I think, well, like Star Wars Legion, you have like command cards that you use once every round. Like you start the round with it, but in this game, it's an active part. It's like play this card when this happens, which is unique and pretty cool. Um, One other really unique thing about Song of Ice and Fire is the tactics zone or the tactics board. And that's basically you have these non-combatant units, like people that don't fight but are like involved in politics or the actual Game of Thrones, right? And they're doing stuff to like buff the people on the battlefield, which is really cool. Because I can bring Catelyn Stark or Cersei Lannister and still use them, right? And you like activate them in the same sequence as your military units. So you then have to make these interesting choices between, do I go with my soldiers to get the first attack, or do I make the political move to ensure that my opponent doesn't take that zone on the board, right? So, some of the like wider stuff about this game, besides the actual gameplay, um, it's weird. So I was pulling up websites for all these games, and their website is just not up or working. Like it's really bizarre. Like I couldn't find it online at all. I could only find like third party retailers selling the miniatures, and there's no way to pull up the miniatures and get like a really good look at them. Like a 360 view, which is really bizarre to me. It's almost like they're trying to hide the miniatures, like they know they're a little lower quality, so they don't want to show them off as well. It's kind of a weird situation. Um, as far as buying the miniatures, this game will randomly go through droughts of certain popular units you just can't obtain without buying them on eBay for crazy prices, right? Like I remember when I was getting started, I think it was some of the Lannister stuff that I wanted, like Lannister Heroes 2 or something, like was out in the wild, but you just couldn't find it. And, maybe COVID had something to do with that. I don't know, but I think it's always been a problem. Like I know, like Daenerys Targaryen and her dragons, who are obviously a huge draw to the game, right? You just couldn't find. So that's an issue. um, for new people trying to get stuff to actually play the game, right? Like, you need to be able to buy the models. And then finally, um, this game I feel like has an emphasis on competitive play, which is fine, but when you go to a game night or you match up with somebody on TTS, say, like their community has this website, Song of Ice and Fire stats. Here, I can pull it up, where they track every single game that's played, right? So like here's the faction power rankings. Like Greyjoys are the best right now by a lot apparently because they're 42, Free Folk are 20. And like it's really cool that every game is tracked and people can earn awards and stuff. But as a new player joining the community, I don't know what I'm doing. Like I'm new. I don't know all the strategy. I know how to play the game, but like, I'm not beating these 8 people right here, right? And when every single game counts, nobody takes it easy on you, right? And there's even like trophies, like see here, like this guy, these little trophies are like win a game with every commander of that faction. So I literally like went on the Discord and I was like, I'm new, I want to play a game. And somebody was like, oh, cool, I'm gonna use a bad commander in order to get his trophy because I can't get it anywhere else. And that happened to me multiple times when I was trying to play the game. So maybe I just went on a bad luck streak, but that was a huge turnoff for me, honestly. Um, it's kind of a weird thing, like that might just be a TTS thing. Like if you have a great local community or a friend to play with, awesome. It's a really fun game and you'll get a lot out of it. Um, so ultimately, where I'm gonna rank it is, I think I'm gonna put it in C for now. because it's a perfectly fun game. Um, it's a smaller game. Like it has a dedicated community, right? But it can be tough to find games, and if you go onto TTS, it's very cutthroat. So it's tough to get into the game. You can't get some of the miniatures. You can't look at the miniatures. The miniatures are a little bit rough, but actually playing the game with a friend, you're gonna have a good time. Um, so just really quickly, the actual rankings. Um, S tier. So like, obviously this is all subjective, right? So like, what I think is the best miniatures game is going to be an S. I think I'll just put whatever I think is the best one is going into S and nothing else will. A will be like, you can still purchase it. It's a fun game. It's relatively cheap to enter. Good community. B is not like perfectly average, like costs a little bit more painting involved, whatever. C is like maybe go into it specifically with a friend. You'll play it together. Um, it can take you a long time to get into it. You need to be okay with missing some stuff that you just can't buy. And then D will be like you can't get any of the miniatures. The gameplay is bad. The miniatures are bad. So we'll see where that ends up. I don't have these planned out, like in advance. I'm just talking through them, right? It's more about me discussing these games rather than where they actually rank. So that was Song of Ice and Fire. Let's move on to Warhammer Age of Sigmar. So this is my current obsession because as you can see, I bounce around between games. I do a lot of wheeling and dealing. Like I'll buy a used army, paint most of it, play with it, keep it for a while, maybe sell it, maybe not. But I like trying out new stuff, right? Like I don't know, you know, like what that says about me, but that's just kind of how I operate, right? And my current thing is Warhammer Age of Sigmar because fourth edition is arriving in like 3 weeks from when this video will be published. It comes out in July. So I've played Warhammer Age of Sigmar. I guess it was first edition when I got into it. I walked into a Games Workshop. He told me about it, and I bought the Flesh Eater Court starter box. He told me there was a uh, like tournament coming up for newer players, and I would need everything built and painted in like 2 weeks. And I did it, and I had a blast. Um, it was awesome. This needs to be said. All these Warhammer games, all the miniatures are fantastic. Like, I don't think, I mean, this is obviously up for debate, but like, I personally think that Games Workshop and Warhammer creates the best miniatures in the market. So here, let me show you these Flesh Eater Courts that I bought initially, right? So, like, this guy was in the box. Like, that's an awesome miniature, right? It's a zombie dragon. Um, like, they're great miniatures, but they're very expensive. I don't know why this is in uh, British pounds, but as you can see, this guy by himself is $75. And that's kind of the issue with Warhammer games, right? It's like the barrier to entry is very high. Like this Royal Zombie Dragon costs $75 and he's maybe like a fifth of my army if I bring him maxed out. So it's like 75 times 5 is what, $375? Like that's a lot of money to spend on a hobby in one specific game, right? Um, so Warhammer Age of Sigmar The setting is basically the old Warhammer fantasy from way back in the day. It was kind of running stagnant. It was dying off a little bit, and they blew it up and started Age of Sigmar with a new setting, but they brought in some of the old characters. So it kind of had like a rocky start, right? But I think nowadays it's a great game. I think it's better than Warhammer 40K, as we'll get to. I don't think the setting is as good, but it's still cool and unique, and there's a lot going on, right? Like the more you learn about it, the cooler it gets, which is awesome. Like there's a character like Nagash, who's the god of death, and he has these armies of death under him that he controls, but he's actually like punishing them for all eternity, but he's also like super petty and feuds with the other gods and blah blah blah. Um, so miniatures awesome, setting is awesome. I mentioned the price of the miniatures, very expensive. Like that's a monster for $75. Whoops. But like, see, Games Workshop updated their website and it's awful. I do not like their new website, so that's a hit against it. So like this guy right here, the Arch Regent, $35 for a single character, and he is a tiny part of your army. Like it adds up quickly. These guys, the Warcry Royal Beast Flayers, I mean they look fantastic, but they're $60, and I don't know the exact points to be honest with you, but like they're probably around 100 points, and you need 2,000 points to play the game. So what, 100 out of 2,000 is 1/20th? Like, you can see where I'm going with this. And then there's stuff like this, the Charnel Throne. So this is a what's called faction terrain, and it's $52, and it's free points wise for your army. So like if I play Flesh Eater Courts, I want to have the Charnel Throne because I can just bring it for free, right? But it's like $52 of extra. I mean, not a tax because you're like getting a model and it's cool and you paint it, but it feels like I'm mandated to buy it. And I don't want to feel like I'm mandated to buy anything, right? Like I just want to buy the stuff I want to buy. Like I might prefer that this $52 went to the Marrow Scroll Herald because he's cool looking, right? Like I want to paint this guy. But no, I need to get the Charnel Throne to like operate the army correctly because it just sucks to feel like you're playing at a disadvantage, you know? It's like yes, you can play without the Charnel Throne, but it feels bad. And you don't want to be feeling bad when you're playing a game for fun as a hobby. Like you want to feel good. You want to purchase and play with things that you enjoy. Oh, here's Nagash I was talking about. He's pretty sweet. But so beyond that, um, like this is another thing in fourth edition. I don't want to get too into the weeds here, but like every army can bring their endless spells or manifestations for free, like they don't cost points. And this is another $45 that I like should have if I'm trying to like, you know, play the game competitively for sure. You need this stuff. But even just for fun, you don't want to feel like you're playing at a disadvantage, right? So you're already $97 like down. It's stuff that you like need to have. And then they're not selling the book right now because they're about to launch a new edition. But you also, and this is my number one problem with the Warhammer games, is you have to pay for the rules, which I honestly think is ridiculous. Like $50 just for the rules to play your game. And there have been a lot of situations where the book came out and it's already out of date. and I paid $50 for it. Like obviously there's stuff beyond rules, right? Like there's art, there's painting tips, like there's cool stuff in there. And it's a hardback, it's nice, but like $50 is a lot of money to just play the game. And I personally am in the hobby for the gameplay and the painting. Like, you know, like if your plan is just to buy the Marrow Scroll Herald again and just paint him, awesome. Have at it. I personally like to collect things that I can use, like that have a purpose, like a game or do something, right? Um, and then even beyond your battle tome is what it's called, you need the core rules, which is another like $60. Like, so just to play the game, we're already like $200 down. And then the army itself is another $500 to $600 roughly. And they're raising the prices, right? Um, so like if money is not an issue for you, then Warhammer is fantastic, right? Like you can buy all the stuff, you'll have it. You can pay for the app every month, which they just announced is going to be paywalled, which sucks. Like that was literally announced today. Like I think that's dumb. Like I don't know if I mentioned it, but the Song of Ice and Fire game has a fantastic app. Like it's a much smaller game, awesome app. You can look at any unit, all of its characteristics, the army rules, the command cards. It gets updated for free, which that by itself comes with some issues because it's like I need to print out the rules again, but like in Warhammer, you literally have to pay for the updated rules, and it's not cheap. It's like $50, right? So, I will say that, Sigmar gets stuff all the time, but your faction that you choose may not get new models for years, right? So then you feel like, well, I want to keep playing, but I'm a little bit bored of Flesh Eater courts, so I want to dive into Nurgle, whatever. Um, and then that has all the same issues, right? It's like you need the free terrain, points wise terrain, you need the endless spells. Yeah, it's just it adds up quickly, and this is why I buy primarily only used armies for Warhammer games. Like I just bought like a used Night Hunt army. I traded for a Cruel Boys army locally. So like that's how I personally operate with Warhammer games if I want to play them, because just buying them new is like not feasible for me right now. Like I have twins. I have twin babies. Um, so I'm just gonna check my criteria again. So I mentioned the app is paywall now, which sucks. It's a lot of money to get into. Um, the miniatures, you know, they're for sale. You can get them. It's Games Workshop. Uh, so long-term support, I would have said that Warhammer is safe, right? Like, you know, Warhammer will be around for a long time. But literally with this new edition, they cut two entire armies and a huge chunk, a huge chunk of their like, you know, poster boy faction, the Stormcast Eternals. And I had a Stormcast Eternals army not that long ago. Like I sold it, but if I still had those models, I would be very upset if they were suddenly just, you know, cut from the game. Like I can't use them in tournaments. Like I know you could still use them in casual games, but like people like to use the official rules, right? Like, well, obviously you can play with your friends or whatever, but if I went to a pickup game and I brought models that no longer have rules, there's going to be a problem. Balance. I mean, the Warhammer games are famously not very well balanced, right? Like, I think Sigmar is relatively balanced, but like, there's always broken stuff, right? Like literally the battle tomes that you spend money on can like have an interaction that's broken and needs nerfing almost immediately, and it's constantly changing, right? So I think Warhammer is best played with a good friend or group of friends, and you just have a good time. I don't think it plays very well super competitively, to be honest. Okay, with that being said, where am I going to put Age of Sigmar? In summary, amazing miniatures. Um, it's fun to play with friends, but like it's very expensive. You get nickeled and dimed all the time. I think I'm gonna put it solidly in B. Um, and as we get more Warhammer games here, we're gonna compare and contrast. But it's solid. Like if you're looking to get into a miniatures game and you don't mind spending that extra money, I think Sigmar is a pretty good starting point, especially if you like the setting, the fantasy setting. All right, let's go on to Marvel Crisis Protocol, which, if you've watched my channel before, if you haven't, 90% of my videos are about Marvel Crisis Protocol. Um, I I own basically every miniature, or my brother does, and we just swap back and forth. So I have access to everything. I got into it during COVID, I believe. Um, and I have just loved it ever since. This is made by Atomic Mass Games. This is their website. So, what is this game? It's basically it's the Marvel universe, so most people are familiar with that from the movies. It's kind of a blend of the movies and comics, right? Like they pull from the movies, they pull from the comics, but it's primarily kind of their own thing, which is kind of cool. So here you can see the new core set is like Captain America, Iron Man, Captain Marvel, Black Widow, Spider-Man versus Red Skull, Doc Ock, so on and so forth. So the theme is Marvel. If you like Marvel, you're gonna like the miniatures. Here, let me look at a specific model here. So, like, here's Doc Ock, right? This is a great model. Like, it's plastic. Um, they're nice and big. They're like hero scale is what people call it. So they're slightly larger than average compared to Warhammer. Like the Warhammer heroes are smaller than these characters. And that comes with some pros and cons. Like I personally think it's easier to paint because they're not like overly detailed, like they get straight to the point, but they're very recognizable, right? Like when you see this, it's like that's Doc Ock, which is cool. But with that comes some like you can't really customize him as well as you can in Warhammer because I didn't really touch on this, but in Warhammer you can paint your guys however you want, right? Like you could do whatever you want. You could come up with a cool theme behind your army. Whereas in Marvel Crisis Protocol, obviously you can paint this guy however you want. It's your miniature, go for it. But like it's still Dr. Octopus. Like he has a long and storied history that people know, and if you're doing weird stuff with him, is kind of strange. Like you need to keep him Doc Ock because his rules are Doc Ock, right? So there's not like as much customization there, you know, but for me it works. I tend to paint them traditionally. I'll do like an alternate costume here and there, but I usually go for like box art. But I also do that in Warhammer, so what are you gonna do? All right, as far as gameplay, I'm just gonna say I think Marvel Crisis Protocol is the most fun miniatures game I have played. Like out of these, 10 games, I think Marvel is just the most fun. Like, why is that? It's like, well, I have five of my superheroes versus five of your superheroes, and we're gonna punch it out and throw cars at each other. I'm gonna throw you around. I think that's the main thing, right? Is like you throw characters around, you blow up terrain, and that feels very like I don't, what's the right word? Like involved, like the board you're playing on matters. Whereas in most of these other miniatures games, the terrain is cool and it's there, but it's like it's just there, right? And it's not very like realistic that nothing's happening. Whereas in Marvel, it's like it feels very dynamic, um, which is cool. And I've talked for hours and hours and hours on this channel about Marvel Crisis Protocol. So if you want to know more about it, check those out. But I think it's relatively well balanced, like the gameplay. It runs into some issues at the tippy top of play, but like I've played games with my wife at home, just throwing stuff at each other, and it's super fun. And it's easy to get into. Like, you know, m- my wife plays games, but she doesn't get involved in the like super long, heavy duty games like Warhammer. But like Marvel, it's like, hey, here's Doc Ock. Roll 5 dice when he attacks. He does cool stuff. Awesome. It worked out well. Like I've I've done like I've taught and played a game with my wife, my brother, my brother-in-law, multiple friends, like people at the game store. Like it's super easy to learn, but it's difficult to master, which is fantastic. Like like that's a sign of a great game, right? It's like easy to pick up for new people, but getting really good at the game takes some time and effort, which is really cool. Like I think that's what you want. Whereas when we compare that to Warhammer, Warhammer is very difficult to learn. Like there's literally money involved to just get the rules. Whereas, Marvel, there's a PDF of the rules. Like, look, you go on the website, you click rules or a rule book. There it is. You can read the rules, which to me is fantastic. Like, they can post changes to this. It's free. They don't do changes too often, which I think is kind of nice because I'm not having to like print out new stuff or learn new things. I just, I can keep up with changes every year or so or whatever it may be. Um, Let me just check my list here. Oh, it's a brand new game, so you can buy anything at any point, like their website might randomly run out of stock, like, Bishop and Nightcrawler are sold out, but you can get them anywhere, right? Like you can get them on Amazon next day delivery where I live in most places. Like it's at all the local game stores. Like you can get the miniatures if you want them. There's Hulk, MODOK, Green Goblin. Like it's really well fleshed out now. I think there's 185 characters. So your favorite character is probably in this game, which is really cool. And one of the coolest things about Marvel Crisis Protocol is that any character can be played with anybody else, which to me is phenomenal because as you can see, I bounce around between stuff, right? Like I've played all these different games. I like playing different factions. I guess I get bored of playing the same thing over and over again. So the rules in Marvel Crisis Protocol say half of your team just needs to be from that affiliation is what it's called, and you get the bonus. And then the rest of your team could be literally anything you want as long as you fit within the points limit. So like if half of my team is the Avengers, the other half could be MODOK and Green Goblin. Awesome. But that means that when they put out a new character, or if you just join the game, if you're scrolling through the products page, you see what's an example here? Um, Miss Marvel. If you see Miss Marvel and you like the model, you like the rules, because look, we can click here. Here's the model. Here's her rules. Here's the card she comes with. 360 view. If I like Miss Marvel, I can buy her or play her with what I already have. I don't need an entire army to use that character. So, for instance, in Warhammer or even Song of Ice and Fire, or most of these games, honestly, like if I see Festus the Leech Lord, let's just look at him because he's here. If I want to play as Festus the Leech Lord, I need a 2,000 point army of Nurgle. Like, I cannot play him by himself. It's cool to buy the model and paint it. Like, that's obviously totally fine, but I then can't use him in the game. It's unfortunate. It's like honestly, maybe that saves you money in the long run because I'm not buying like random characters even though they're really cool. Whereas in Marvel, it's like I have everything because I can play it with anything, right? Like it's just cool. Like Rhino, he's in the Spider Foes and Criminal Syndicate, but he's great in any team. So like he's a great pickup for anyone. Like you're not limited. Like I don't feel like I'm forced to buy anything, right? I can just buy the stuff that I think looks cool. Um, so I think that's a huge benefit. Whereas like even Star Wars Legion, like, let's use characters people are more familiar with. If I want to play as Darth Vader, I need a Galactic Empire army, right? It's like I can't just play Darth Vader. Well, in Star Wars Shatterpoint you can, but we'll get to that later. So, uh, there's no like sponsored apps or list builders, but there's some really good ones out there, and they don't get, shut down or struck down or whatever you want to call it. So they're really good. Um, I think Marvel Crisis Protocol is an A. It's not perfect. I have a couple issues with it, but for the most part, super fun game, and I would recommend it to anyone that's just starting to get into miniatures games. Yeah, super fun. Highly recommend if you try it. I played it after Warhammer, like I find it very refreshing. Um, so just really quick, I want to say that I've set up something called Buy Me a Coffee. I don't have a Patreon or anything. I feel like I don't provide enough content to have like a monthly subscription. But if you feel like supporting me, go on to that Buy Me a Coffee. There will be a link in the comments if you just want to do a one-time contribution to help fuel this kind of stuff. That would be fantastic. Um, that would just like blow me away. But beyond that, just leaving a like or subscribe or comment would help me out tremendously, helping it reach more people. So yeah, thanks for watching and helping me out. But let's move on to the next game here, Star Wars Legion, which is also made by AMG. Well, to be fair, they didn't create the game, but they're now the caretakers of it. So, what is Star Wars Legion? Star Wars Legion is the army. It's the game where you play as armies in Star Wars, right? Like Star Wars has games where you're in fighter jets or capital cruisers or just standalone characters. This is like two armies fighting each other. It's like the Galactic Empire launching their ground assault on Hoth on the rebels, right? Like that's the kind of stuff that you play out, which is really cool. Like, I I own the Galactic Empire, so like Darth Vader, Emperor Palpatine, General Veers. Like the theme is there if you like Star Wars. If you want to relive the movie battles or come up with your own battles, super fun. Um, so the miniatures. The miniatures are fine, I would say. They're not fantastic because some of them are kind of old. I'm not sure what's going to happen here when we click on this. Yeah, like they don't even show them the old stormtroopers on their website. So I'm not exactly sure what year they came out, but they're what's called soft plastic, which means they come in a little plastic bag and like three pieces, and you just put those pieces together. Like you don't really need glue, but you should probably glue it. But they kind of have less detail. They're a little wonky. They literally get bent. And all the newer stuff is now in what's called hard plastic, where you like cut it out of a sprue and put it together. And those look a lot better and have better detail. So Star Wars Legion kind of has like a wide range of like if stuff looks good or not. Like nothing looks bad, right? But like Moff Gideon is a newer one. Like he looks fantastic. Like I have him. Model is dope. Yeah, here he is. Like that's pretty sweet. They are very small. These are small miniatures. It's smaller than Marvel for sure. It's smaller than Warhammer. I think the scale is, oh, I'm gonna get it wrong. Maybe 24. Somebody can correct me on that. But it's just a different style, right? Like if you like this, awesome. But that allows you to get a ton of miniatures on the battlefield, right? So it's like you can have Moff Gideon, multiple squads of Dark Troopers, a bunch of Stormtroopers, and an ATST, and that's your whole army, and it's really cool looking. Um, so as far as gameplay, I enjoy Star Wars Legion, and I have a really active local community, which is great, so I can like get games whenever I want. But my local community tends to be pretty competitive. So I don't know if I can really speak to like how Legion plays casually because I typically am playing in more competitive games, which is not a problem. Like I think Legion plays well as a competitive game. Um, but I feel like it's a kind of game where if you don't do your list building correctly, like if you bring the wrong combination of units, you can get punished for it pretty heavily because the game has like a random order system. So every turn you play a card from your command hand, like based on what named characters you have like command cards and they do certain things at the start of the round of the game. And those issue orders to units and in units with orders on them can be activated as you choose, right? But everything else is like randomly drawn. And if you just have a random mishmash of units, you can run into a lot of problems. And on top of that, your army has to have three core units, which are like stormtroopers for the Empire or rebels. It's like just basic rebel troopers. And I personally do not like that. Like, I don't like being forced to take certain things. So it's like when I start playing Star Wars Legion, I have to buy three units of stormtroopers and paint them. Like, I don't enjoy that, right? It's like I want to buy and paint the stuff I want to play as, like these droids. Like, you get two of them here. Like, I want to play as these guys. I don't want to be like, I don't mind playing as stormtroopers, right? But it's like, I don't want to be forced to play stormtroopers. I want the option to play stormtroopers. And I think that's like a big deal for me. I've learned over the years is like I just want to buy and paint the stuff I want to buy and paint. I don't want to feel forced into it. So over the last couple years, Star Wars Legion has had what's called battle forces come out, which is like really thematic armies that lighten up on that core restrictions. You don't have to have like three stormtrooper units in certain scenarios. So that's been good. I've enjoyed those quite a bit. Typically, when I play, I use one of those battle forces just to avoid having three core. So I think that's a little bit of a knock against Legion. As far as cost of entry, it's it's cheaper than Warhammer, right? But like for instance, if we look here, this is a new unit, the Bad Batch. Everyone loves the Bad Batch. They're $50 for a unit, right? Or like the range troopers, $50. So like you can get into the game pretty cheaply. Like they have these Battle Force boxes that offer a pretty significant discount, but it's still fairly pricey, you know? Like these large scale army games tend to cost more money to get into. That's just the way it is because you need more stuff, right? Whereas the skirmish games like Marvel or Star Wars Shatterpoint, you only need like, well, in Marvel, you need 10 characters, which is literally just the core set, which I should have mentioned, but the core set is a great buy for that game. Whereas the core set for Star Wars Legion or any of the Warhammer games do not give you a full army out of the box. Like, I can buy the core set and I still need to purchase a ton of other stuff to even have like a standard game, right? So it's a pretty high cost to entry compared to those. But, the rules are free. They're all right here. The PDF of the rules is online, just like Marvel, which is fantastic. Um, the game is relatively straightforward to play. It has a lot of keywords you need to learn, but most of the keywords are like on the unit cards and it says what they are. So that can take a little bit of getting used to, but it's not too bad. One thing I don't love about it is there's these little upgrade cards that you're supposed to like bring to the game and like use with them, and I just find that kind of a huge hassle. It's like because I have all my unit cards and upgrade cards, and whenever I switch up my list, I need to find all the little upgrade cards. It's just kind of a pain. It's not like a deal breaker, but it's definitely something to consider. But that does give your units more like flexibility, right? It's like this game they have targeting scopes, but the next game they have stims, so they do different things. So that's kind of cool. You're getting more options out of the model you've bought and painted. Uh, so the miniatures can be purchased anywhere. It's just like Marvel. Like they might sell out sometimes, but they always come back. You can find them. It's an ongoing game. And as far as long-term support, they've they as in AMG, the creators or the caretakers, have said that everything in that soft plastic I was talking about is being converted into hard plastic. And they would not be doing that if they didn't have long-term plans for the game. So I would not worry about the game losing support anytime soon. Uh, I mentioned the game tends to lean competitive, but like I said, well, most of these miniatures games, if you have a good friend or group of friends that are all on the same page, you'll have a good time. But most of your pickup games will probably be competitive and you need a stronger list. Um, balance, I think it's okay. Like, obviously there's going to be a best thing, but it's never like there's five factions in the game and any of them can win, right? Like there's not one that's like so bad you can't win a game. So it's perfectly fine. There's no apps or anything, but there's tons of list builders out there, which is great. So that's Star Wars Legion. I think I'm gonna put it, hmm, probably B below Age of Sigmar. Like it's good. It's Star Wars, so it's cool. But army based thing is a little rough for me because it's the same kind of thing with Song of Ice and Fire, where it's like I want to use Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker, but I'm forced to bring 20 stormtroopers. It's like I don't love that. So we're on to the big one, Warhammer 40,000. So if you've clicked on this video, you probably know what this is. It's the big daddy of miniatures games, right? Like this is how I started. Like when I was 11 or whatever, I played orcs, Gazgul Thraka for life. But it's been around a very long time. It's still successful. It's growing, but I I'm gonna be honest. I don't play Warhammer 40,000 anymore. It just it ended up being too much, like too much money, too much brain capacity, like too much. I don't know if this is the right word, but like toxicity. Um, Let me just summarize this. So Warhammer 40,000 has an amazing setting, right? Like it's its own thing. You literally can't get it anywhere else. Like what Games Workshop has here with the Warhammer lore is so cool. It's like the grim dark future. The Emperor is has been dying for forever and chaos is threatening the galaxy, but there's also a bunch of aliens and there's all these epic characters like Lionel Johnson and Azrael and Gazgul and Mephiston, and they just have so much rich history, right? And if you want to just buy models and paint them, like, dude, you can't go wrong with Warhammer 40,000, right? Like, if you want a sci-fi miniature, this is it. Like, look at this guy. It's crazy. Like, it's so well done. It's so detailed. Sometimes they can get a little bit over detailed, but for the most part, it's okay. Um, yeah. So miniatures, top notch. Setting, top notch. Look into it if you don't know much about it. It's awesome, but it's a rabbit hole. So be prepared. There's like 40 different armies. Oh my God, their website. Yeah, look, there's like the Imperium, Chaos, Xenos. All these have like 10 armies in them. So like there's tons of options. Like there's all these aliens. Like I played orcs when I first started. There's Gazgul. I still have his model even though I sold my orc army. Um, Miniatures awesome, theme awesome, gameplay. So this is really where it falls short for me. And just to give a quick history, I obviously played when I was a little kid. Probably played totally wrong. That's fine. I got back into it in what's called 7th edition because they do like these reboots every now and then. And I got back into the game in 7th edition and I picked it back up with my brother. We learned it. It was pretty detailed and there was a lot to learn, right? But it was fun. Like I had a good time. Um, and then the game became simpler, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? But definitely felt toned down. And I still played through 8th edition, and hopefully I have my history right here. But when what's called stratagems were introduced into the game is when they lost me. So, like I had the core rulebook, right? I had my codex for orcs. Let's just use orcs as an example. So I have my orc army, I have my codex, I have the core rules. Then they brought in stratagems, which are, for people who don't know, they're like one-time use effects that majorly impact the game for that turn. And as established when I talked about Age of Sigmar, the rules in the Warhammer games are not free. So like, I'm not buying a codex for 40 different armies. So I literally don't have access to their rules unless I go on like, sketchy third party websites and read them all. But it's like, maybe I read them all, but I don't have them memorized, right? So these stratagems were like literally gotchas. Like I have my battle plan planned out around my own stratagems, then they have a stratagem that just hard counters me and it just feels bad. Like literally, um, I think the final straw for me was I was playing with my brother. We were kind of playing together as the Gene Stealer Colts against, one of my brother's friends. And, since we're on a team, we're actively talking about our plan and what we're doing, right? So our opponent heard us talking and looked through his book for a specific stratagem that just hard countered us, right? And when we went to do our plan, he used this stratagem that we don't know about because I'm not familiar with his army. I don't have all of his stratagems memorized. And he just owned us, right? And it was a bad experience. And like, obviously one bad experience isn't enough to like condemn a game, right? But I was finding that whenever I played the game, there was just so much rules confusion. Like I felt like I knew the rules pretty well, but like they didn't know the rules or they were like misinterpreting their rule book or their stratagem because everything has really techie timing because it needs to because miniatures games give you so many options. Everything needs very specific wording. And I just found it turned into like rules debates or like gotchas. And I wasn't having fun anymore. It's like I just want to go play the game, not debate what the rules are. And I feel confident that if both myself and the other player are like 100% aware of my rules and the other player's rules and the core rules and whatever the season rules tend to be, it's a great game, I'm sure, but it's like that's a lot of hoops to jump through and they're literally paywalled hoops, right? Like I have to pay money to like see it for myself, you know? So then that itself leads to like, hey, it's not that I don't believe you, but like, can I see your rule book to confirm it? And they'll be like, oh, I don't even have the rule book. I was reading it off of this website. And it's just, it's awkward, It's like, and then playing with strangers, whenever I played a random pickup game, it it was not a good experience. It either took a very long time or it was just this like devolved into this like rules mess. Like I'm not trying to sound too negative, but like I feel like there's some easy fixes Warhammer could do to make it a better playing experience, right? It's like make the rules free, make it so I could like look stuff up. Like I know they've cut out a lot of the stratagems in 10th edition, which to be honest with you, I haven't played 10th edition because it was just it's like it's too much. Like I still own my Dark Angels army, right? Like I could get back into it if I want to, but I just haven't had the desire. And now that I've tried other games, I've seen how poorly Warhammer 40,000 plays. And that's a real shame because the models are so cool, the setting is so cool, but like I do not enjoy playing it. Like I definitely find it worse than Age of Sigmar. It's like overly complicated, too many armies, blah blah blah. Like I said, the cost of entry is ridiculous. It's the same thing of like owning multiple books. The books get updated, so they're out of date. All the miniatures you could just buy. Like some of them, well, nowadays most of them are plastic, but there will be a few resin or metal thrown in based on what you're playing. That's not like a deal breaker, you know. Long-term support, Warhammer 40,000 is going to be around for a very long time. So if you get into it, they will last. Like the power level of each unit will fluctuate, obviously, but that's not why you should be buying miniatures, in my opinion. Um, Community. So this is obviously very subjective, but like I've played in Warhammer tournaments, right? And it's like I don't know if it's like malicious or not, but when there's so many rules happening and stratagems flying out of nowhere and I don't exactly know what you're doing, there's a lot of opportunities to cheat or like do stuff at the wrong time or whatever. And I don't think most people cheat, but I think some people definitely like misremember rules because they change so often and they are like remembering the rules from the previous edition that no longer apply. Like it gets messy, right? And just recently I was at the game store playing a Middle Earth strategy battle game and I saw somebody that I used to play Warhammer with and he asked me, you know, if I was still playing and I said, I mean, I haven't played recently, but I still have my Dark Angels army if I did. And he just like rolled his eyes and went, "Oh, right, you're a Dark Angels player." And it's like, you know, it turns out I guess Dark Angels are like OP right now, like which I didn't know that, but like, you know, I've had my Dark Angels army for like at least 10 years now, and like what they did back then is totally different from what they do now. So like, I don't know. It's just kind of a weird situation, you know? It's like I spend all this time and money building up an army and then, you know, people like judge you for what you're playing. Like I feel like that happens a lot in Warhammer. It's like, oh, you play this army, you do this kind of thing or whatever. And, you know, once again, your local community, your play group balances all this out. But like there are certain armies that people just won't play against. Like if you go to a pickup night and you say you're playing Chaos Knights, people will be like, "Oh, I won't play against Chaos Knights." Like I've literally seen that happen, and it sucks. It's like, well, I have my army and I want to use it, but yeah. The balance is whack. It's all over the place. Like stuff is either OP or very bad. You know, there's obviously stuff in the middle, and it's worse at higher ends of play. But then the app, it's like they have an app now, but it's literally double paywalled because you have to pay a monthly subscription for the app, and then to get all the rules, you need to have the codex put into the app. So it's like $5 a month plus your codex. Like it adds up to be a ton just to like attempt to play the game correctly. So that's my little rant about Warhammer 40,000. Um, I think I'm gonna put it in C. Like amazing miniatures, but like that's what keeps it at D for me. Like it's just rough for me, guys. Like maybe things have changed. You know, like I said, I haven't played 10th edition, but I don't know. Let me know what you think. I know that's a little controversial. Well, that's definitely controversial, but now that I've played these other games, I just see how much better they are. All right, well that's that done. let's talk about potentially another rough one. Star Wars Armada. Um, so just to caveat this, this could potentially not even be counted as a miniatures game because you don't build the miniatures, like you buy them in a package and they're already painted, right? Let's see if we can find it in here. Yeah, here we go. Star Wars Armada. Um, it's like this right here. So you buy the box, there's a painted ship, you put it on a flight stand and you play the game. Cool. So my brother, well, I guess some of it's mine as well, but it's mostly his. But between us, we have literally every single ship in Star Wars Armada, which is really cool. The game is sweet. Obviously it's Star Wars, but it's like the capital ships. It's the big ships. So the like Star Destroyers and the Profundity, like in Rogue One, and the Liberties, which I didn't know the names of any of these ships before I played. The Starhawk is amazing. Like, yeah, it's a super cool game. You still have little like fighter squadrons. You have like squads of X-wings going around, and there's aces is what they're called, which are like named characters in those squadrons. So it's like I have Luke Skywalker in this X-wing squadron, and they're going to attack. Like, it's super cool. The game is really, really cool. Like I cannot understate that. Like, and when you have it on the table, it looks impressive because it's like I have my line of capital ships with fighters all around them against yours, and we're gonna fly at each other. And that's essentially what happens, right? Um, one of the cool things about this game is you don't just like move ships like 6 inches or a foot or whatever. There's this cool flight tool, and every ship has like a different speed and oh gosh, let me get the word wrong. Is it tilt or something? But basically, they can't like some ships can turn harder than others at different speeds. Like it's really cool and unique. Um, oh, what is that called? Well, anyways, like cool way to move the game. Looks awesome. As far as gameplay, it's surprisingly deep because like every ship has an arc, has 4 arcs. So it's like let's see if you can see it. So here, so these arcs here, so like this has a giant front arc with a ton of dice. So if it shoots at you from the front, you're taking a ton of damage. But it has a few cannons on the side that shoot you, and that's all based on where you are, right? Like it's really cool. It has upgrade cards, like instead of putting Luke Skywalker in an X-wing, you can put him onto like a capital ship, and he gives you bonuses for being there. I don't know exactly what it is, but yeah, like you have cool capital ships and characters, and the characters do make like significant impacts. Like some of them on your whole army, they're your general. Like if you bring, like if your fleet is commanded by Darth Vader, he has an amazing buff that feels impactful, right? It's not just like, you know, add a die to defense rolls or something. It's like really, really good. There's a Super Star Destroyer, which is just massive. Uh, we have one of these. It's awesome. It really skews the game, but it's fun. Um, Now, cost of entry in the miniatures. So, if you haven't heard, this game was recently officially canceled by the same people that do Marvel Crisis Protocol and Star Wars Legion. So, I don't want to get too into this, but Star Wars Armada, Star Wars Legion, and Star Wars X-Wing, which I have not played X-Wing, which is why it's not on the list, but I've heard it's similar to Armada. It's a fun game. It's kind of the same thing, but just fighters instead of capital ships. But anyways, it was with a company called Fantasy Flight Games. They were restructured, ordered to move their games to AMG, and I assume AMG was told to no longer develop for Star Wars Armada, and there haven't been any new ships for I think 3 years, and they just announced the other week that it's officially ending. Which, I mean, the writing's been on the wall for years now, but now that it's official, it's kind of sad, you know. Like the game is fun. Like obviously we have everything, so my brother and I can still play it together. But this is not the kind of game that you're gonna easily find a local community to play with, right? Like you'll specifically need to seek somebody out to play this with because there's not just like an already established community unless you're like super lucky for some reason. But like 8 times out of 10, that's not gonna be the case. Uh, Cost. So since the game was announced to be canceled, everything is sold out, and the prices on eBay are like insane. So if you want to play Star Wars Armada, now is not the time. I think the hype is going to die off a little bit, and that's when you can buy in. Or I've heard people are just 3D printing the ships, which is totally fine. But you know, they probably don't look as nice as the real things, but at least you have something to play the game with. Um, Long-term support, obviously the game is dead. Well, it's not dead, but no longer being developed. There will not be new ships for the foreseeable future, so keep that in mind. Community, I mean, everyone I've played against or know that plays has been great. Like they're super friendly. I met a bunch of them at Adepticon. Really nice guys. They know a lot about the game. They're very good at it. Like this is a high skill game, which is really cool. Like nailing that movement I was talking about of like the speeds and the turns, like that takes time and practice, which is really cool. Like it's not just move 6 inches. Like that takes effort, which I think is really sweet. Um, Balance, I don't really know to be honest. I know there was an overpowered ship for a long time that I believe was corrected, but I know Empire has generally been good. But, you know, like when I play with my brother, it's always really close. So, you know, maybe we both suck or something. I don't know, but it's been a good time every time. Uh, there's no apps or anything, but there's definitely list builders out there. So, Star Wars Armada, it's not really a miniatures game and it's no longer being developed, but it's a really fun game. Like if you have the opportunity to try it out, try it out. And I believe there's a mod on TTS, which is really cool. I'm gonna put it. I think I have to put it in C just because it's canceled. But at the top of C, I was tempted by B. But yeah, if you know somebody or you get all the ships, it's a good time. Now, Warhammer: The Horus Heresy, another Warhammer game. So this has the same issues of buying rules and books and not knowing your rules and all that stuff that I don't need to rehash. But for those who don't know, the Horus Heresy is basically like the prequel to Warhammer 40,000. So Warhammer 40,000 is set in the year 40,000. Horus Heresy is set in the year 30,000. So it's 10,000 years before Warhammer 40,000. And I think the setting is just phenomenal. Like there's an entire like New York Times best-selling book series of ridiculously good books. Like the first 3 books in the Horus Heresy were some of the best books I've ever read. Like hands down. I'm not even kidding. Like I don't read that many books to be honest with you, but they stand out in a big way. It's tragic, it's ironic, like it's just good. Check it out if you want to know more about it. Super good. As far as the gameplay, I think it plays a lot better than Warhammer 40,000, and I think it's because the setting is primarily Space Marine versus Space Marine, so it's just easier to like balance, right? It's like if 80% of everyone's army is the same thing, you can plan around that. Whereas in 40,000, it's like it's just chaos, like randomness. Obviously, there's like a couple demon factions. There's like Mechanicus and like the human soldiers, like the basic soldiers that throw like a curveball into it. But the main thing is the difference between the different legions, which is like the big like defining factor of the Warhammer setting. And it's super cool. Like I've spent hours looking through, obviously it's like some guy took a picture of a book in the dark, so I'm trying to squint at it because it's like I don't want to spend $100 on rule books. But I've still read all the Legion rules. They're super thematic and cool. There's a system in the game to like react to stuff, which is cool. But like everyone has the same, well, I shouldn't say that. Some legions have their own specific reactions, but there's one of them, right? It's not like 20. Uh, so yeah, to be honest with you, I haven't played a ton of Horus Heresy. Uh, and I've never really owned a complete army. But like the Horus Heresy is some of the best miniatures. The Sons of Horus, who are like the main characters in that book series. Like this is Horus, like it's named after him. Uh Ridiculous, right? Like so good. This is his old classic one, like amazing. Even the like retro style of Space Marine is really cool. Like where it's just like Mark threes. I love the Mark threes. Like with the little rivets in the armor. Like I think if I got back into sci-fi Warhammer, I would like to do Horus Heresy. But the problem is it's a more niche game than Warhammer 40,000. So it's tougher to like find a play group or, people to play it with, stuff like that. Um, but they are out there and some of the armies can be tough to collect. Like there's it's kind of weird because generally Games Workshop, they don't make rules for stuff they don't have models for. But Horus Heresy, there's still a couple things that are like you can give this legion chain axes, but we're gonna sell you the chain axes that are like five for $20 and you need 100 of them. It's like, what? Like, I'm not gonna do that. So then you go to 3D print, and then that's like a whole nother ball game. It's like I want to be building and painting stuff, not like 3D printing. So there's some awkwardness with that. Um, but yeah, I think it's a good game. I think biggest thing for me is the theme. Like, it's so cool. Like, I love reading about the Horus Heresy, not playing it as much. I think I'm gonna put it here below Armada. So it's in C because it's like I'm not actively playing it right now, but I could see myself playing it in the future, right? And it's still being supported. And it doesn't get as many updates as like 40K or Age of Sigmar. So like when you buy something, I feel like your dollar does go a little bit further because it's not just like immediately updated. So that's the Horus Heresy. Not too much on that because it's so similar to 40K, but it's cool. Now, Star Wars Shatterpoint. So this is the newest game on the list. It literally just had its first birthday, like a couple weeks ago. And this is obviously a Star Wars game, but it's a skirmish game. And to me, that's really cool. Like, you could probably tell the way I've been talking, I tend to prefer skirmish games because, like, well, okay, let me rephrase that. I prefer skirmish games in in established settings. because like in Star Wars, I mentioned it earlier, but like I want to play Luke Skywalker, but I don't want an entire rebel army, you know? So Star Wars Shatterpoint gives me that opportunity. Like, where's Luke? Where you at, Luke? Here he is. So, the way this game works is you have two squads. Each squad is comprised of a primary unit, a secondary unit, and a support unit. And you have two of those, and that's it. So you have anywhere from 6 to 8 models, which, to some people is not what they want. That's totally fine. To me, playing as Luke Skywalker is worth it. Like, I have Luke, I have this is Bausch. People who don't know, that's Leia when they infiltrate Jabba's palace. That's like the theme of this pack is like when they go into Jabba's palace because that's Lando and R2D2 serving drinks on the sail barge. It's cool. Um, but yeah, I think to me that is the main selling point of Shatterpoint is like I can play as the cool characters without the quote tax of buying extraneous stuff. Like I don't enjoy buying random stuff, you know? Just buy the stuff you want, build it and paint it, off you go. Like if I wanted to, my squad could be Darth Vader and his stormtroopers with Luke and his, you know, ragtag rebels. Will those synergize super well together? Probably not. But I'm playing as Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker, and that's cool. Like, as you get more competitive, you probably want to combine them with, similar things like other Rebel or Empire stuff, but you can just do it, Like all these other games, the Warhammer games, Star Wars Legion, Star Wars Armada even, and Middle Earth that's coming up next. Like you have to stay in faction. And, somebody like me that bounces around, like I love the flexibility of just playing whatever I want. Huge selling point for me. Huge selling point. Uh Now, let's talk about the gameplay. So, when I first started playing Shatterpoint, I assumed it would be easy to learn and pretty straightforward. And at its surface, it is, right? Like, it's straightforward, but it's not necessarily easy to learn. And this is kind of tough to explain for me, but I've obviously been in miniatures games for a long time, right? And I started Shatterpoint most recently out of all of these games, right? And typically when I bounce between games, I can go between them pretty well. I have an understanding of what's happening and I can do pretty well in them, right? Star Wars Shatterpoint, that just like didn't happen. I don't know what it was, but like it plays differently to other games because there's a random order deck. So every turn you draw a card, and what you draw is the unit you have to activate. And that's unique for at least these games, right? Like Star Wars Legion has some of that, but you have a lot more control over what you're drawing. Um, like it leads to some awkward situations because the way scoring works is this struggle tracker where you don't like build up points. You like get points, then the other player takes them from you and you take them back and you're literally in a struggle. And then whoever is able to like tug of war it to their side of the score tracker wins the struggle. And then you have to win 2 out of 3 struggles to win the game. So really unique scoring, unique gameplay with the order tokens and whatnot. and there's so few models on the table that like all of them have an impact, right? Like even your supports, like the random stormtroopers with Darth Vader, feel impactful, whereas they typically don't in other games, right? Like in Star Wars Legion, they're literally just the like tax unit that stands on points. In Shatterpoint, my stormtroopers could take out Luke if they get lucky, you know, and they're running around and doing multiple things because there's two of them, and it leads to some really interesting play patterns. And it it threw me off. It took me like 10 games to figure out what the hell was happening in Star Wars Shatterpoint, which was bizarre to me. But somebody that's new to miniatures games and starts playing might initially lose a lot, which isn't super fun, especially if you're playing against good players. And like my very first game was with my buddy John, and it took us like 4 hours and we got through like half the game. Because there's a lot of nuance and corner cases and stuff like that, but it's like the game is still very young. So I think a lot of that will be ironed out. And while the while you're able to purchase and play as anything, as you look deeper into the list building, it actually gets surprisingly restrictive, which like threw me off because like just for an example here, we have Darth Vader's squad and Moff Gideon's squad, right? So the way list building works is Darth Vader is 7 squad points. So the other characters in his squad need to equal 7 or less. So like the Stormtrooper Sergeant is 3 points, and the Stormtroopers are 4 points. But then Moff Gideon is 8 points, so the Death Trooper Escort is his secondary, is 4 points, and the Dark Troopers are 4 points. So what that means is if I play Darth Vader, I can't bring the Death Trooper Escort and the Stormtroopers together. And with the game being so new, there's not very many options for each faction. It's essentially boiled down to like rebels, empire, separatists, and clones. And then there's like bounty hunters and like neutrals thrown in. But for now, as you get competitive, like the list building is tight, which is bizarre to me. Like it feels like that shouldn't be the case, and it probably won't be for the lifespan of the game. But for now, it's a little bit frustrating that I can't bring like Hondo leading the Bad Batch, right? Because there are too many points. So it's like there is list building freedom, but there's not. Like it's kind of bizarre. Hopefully that makes sense. It's just, yeah, it's like, I enjoy Shatterpoint, but it took me a while to enjoy Shatterpoint. And now that I know what's happening in Shatterpoint, I can see its flaws. And I think most of its flaws are in the list building. So, uh, it's a brand new game. You can buy them on Amazon. Cost of entry, this core set right here, has literally everything you need to play for 2 players. So if you wanted to, you could split it with a buddy, a friend. It is, I got it for $90 on Amazon, which is an absolute steal. So just check your Amazon or wherever, for deals. Because I think retail, yeah, it's 165, but I literally got it for $90 and you get 4 squads. Like I can take the Separatists, friend can take the Clones or Republic, or share it, whatever. But again, all the rules are free. The models are fantastic. They're very similar to the Marvel Crisis Protocol models. I think they're actually slightly bigger. They're not the exact same scale, but even the like random clones look amazing, right? And I've talked about not liking random troops, but when it's just two guys, like that's fine with me. I don't mind painting two guys instead of like 50 just to play the game. So, long-term support, brand new game. It's going to be supported for a long time it's like not unless it's not selling well, which I think it's selling pretty well, so it'll be good. The community, I'm actually in a Discord called Hello There. They run a podcast. I'm a patron of theirs. Everyone there is super nice. We have debates and list talk and help and everyone I've met in that community. And for the most part, the Marvel Crisis Protocol community as well have been really great. Um, balance. I do think there's a balance issue in Shatterpoint. Um, this dude right here, Django Fett, is very, very strong. Like everyone just agrees that he's too good. I don't want to get too into the weeds of why he's amazing, but he is like very, very strong. And the other really strong character is Obi-Wan Kenobi, and it's an issue because he's in what's called this dual pack. So it's just him versus Darth Vader, which is awesome, right? Like it looks really cool. It's from the Kenobi show. You get some terrain, you get this little thing, but it's expensive. It's $90 for two characters and some terrain that you can't realistically use in the game. But like Obi-Wan Kenobi and for that matter, this Darth Vader, because there's multiple Darth Vaders, are very, very strong. So it does kind of feel a little paywall-esque, but these characters aren't 100% necessary, right? Like it's different from like having to buy rules or core units just to play the game. It's like I can play Shatterpoint with the core set and still win, you know? So I just wanted to mention that really quick. There's a couple balance issues for the moment. There haven't been any balance updates to the game in its first year. I can imagine there will be one fairly soon, but who knows? Like they might never do one. I don't know. Uh, and there's list builders out there. No official apps, but they're out there. So where should I put Shatterpoint? Um, this is a tough one for me because I don't really have anyone that's played locally. The models are really good. It has convention support. I think I'm gonna put it at the top of B. Like I don't think it's on the same level as Marvel Crisis Protocol right now, but it is a solid game and it's only gonna get better, I think. So now let's talk about Middle Earth Strategy Battle Game, another Games Workshop game. And I'll just tell you right now, I think this is the best Games Workshop game, definitely in terms of gameplay. But not to jump too far ahead of myself here. Um, the setting is obviously the Lord of the Rings. So if you like the Lord of the Rings, Middle Earth strategy battle game, right? Like if you're not familiar, this is a fairly old game. I think it's been around since the movies came out. So I think since 2001, if I'm not mistaken. So at least 20 years. Um, like here's just a look at some of the miniatures. This is the Mordor Battle Host, which is kind of a starter set. Like you get the Witch King, orcs on wolves, orcs on foot. The Witch King is really the main selling point there. Like here's the current starter box: the Battle of Osgiliath, Gothmog versus Faramir. Like Faramir, some named rangers and a bunch of dudes. Gothmog, orcs, and a cave troll, or not a cave troll, just a Mordor troll. Um, like if you like Lord of the Rings, and if you like the movies especially, the theme is awesome. Like the characters have very thematic rules. Like the leader of your force has to be the highest, like heroic tier. Like, if you're playing Rohan, Theoden essentially has to be your leader, which makes sense to me, right? Like he's the king of Rohan, he should be the leader, not Eomer or whatever. Um, Now, gameplay. The gameplay for Middle Earth strategy battle game is phenomenal. Like, it's one of these games that is pretty easy to learn, but so deep and rewarding. Like, more so than Marvel Crisis Protocol. Like, there's more going on, right? Like, it's like the rules allow for you to basically do whatever you want without it being overly complicated. Um, and it's primarily in its combat system. So like most miniatures games, your unit has a range, be it like a gun in Warhammer 40,000 or like you hit them with a sword or whatever. Like that's the range, right? And you just roll your attack and they defend. That's not how it works in a Middle Earth strategy battle game. And the way it works is like obviously they're shooting like dudes with bows can shoot people at range and that's it, right? But like bows are not reliable. Like they might hit on a 4 and then wound on like a 6. So your odds of actually killing someone with a bow are really low, but it's still good that they're in the game because there needs to be some range and there were obviously bows in, Lord of the Rings, but it's not like the primary focus. And then in this game, when two units are locked in combat, which first of all, to get into combat, there's no like random roll. You just move into combat in your movement phase, which is really nice. Because like Warhammer, you roll 2 dice for a charge and you can fail and then you're stuck there. Um, like Shatterpoint, if you're in range 2, you're engaged, but then you can't move out of like combat at the same speed. But in Middle Earth, you just move into combat. And then when you get to the fight phase, which also, by the way, it's not like a true alternating activation kind of game, but like basically, if I have priority, I do all of my movements first, and then you do all of your movements, and then I shoot, then you shoot, and then we fight simultaneously. And the way fighting works is you have your number of attacks, right? Like just a normal guy will have one attack, but Faramir will have two or three. Let's say he has three. So Faramir would roll 3 dice against this orc. The orc would roll 1 die, and it's just whoever rolls higher wins the duel, is what it's called. And then whoever wins the duel can then try to wound their enemy. So it sounds really simple because it is, but the more you think about it, better it gets. Because it's like, okay, Faramir is rolling 3 dice to this orc's 1 die. So Faramir could win this fight, but he might not. Like most other games, if like Darth Vader is fighting a rebel trooper, there's no way the rebel trooper wins. Like it's almost impossible in some of these games, right? Not in Middle Earth. And some people might not like that, but the stakes feel so much higher when you're playing this game. It's like, all right, Faramir's in combat. He should win, but he might not. And it just adds weight to every roll, you know? I feel like sometimes when I'm playing miniatures games, I'm just like rolling dice for no reason or for stuff that doesn't really matter. Middle Earth, every roll is impactful, which feels really good. And, you might say, oh, that, sucks. Faramir can just lose. But heroes in this game have their own resource system called Might, Will, and Fate. And we don't need to get too into it, but essentially every hero has might, and they can spend might to either modify their dice rolls or do heroic actions that are very, very powerful and affect other people in your army. And there's this really interesting balancing act of like, do I save my might to guarantee that I win this fight against this orc, right? Or do I use it to move first and steal priority to get the better position? It's just really cool. Like, it plays so well. Like, for instance, I've mentioned that I went to Adepticon with my brother, and I was new to the game. Like, I had played maybe 15 times with a buddy, and my brother had literally never played. And we joined the doubles event at Adepticon, right? Like that is the biggest convention for miniatures games. And we went in as a noob and never having played. And we had a blast. We had three great games. We actually won a game against the Balrog, and we were playing the Fellowship, which the Fellowship, they're not bad, but they're kind of a meme because you don't have any basic soldiers. And I think that's a testament to the game system, right? Is like my brother and I have played miniatures games for a long time, so we understand what's happening, but we don't get bogged down in the like, I don't know, in the like the random dice rolls or the rules, like I don't know. But the game plays super well. I love the Lord of the Rings. Um, the miniatures, so some of the miniatures in this game are very old and they show it, right? Like, if you just look at the starter box, like there's a new Faramir right here who looks awesome. Then you look at this Ranger and you're like, okay, that's kind of rough. And it's because it is. Like, essentially, basic troops in this game are not being updated, and the heroes are. So, like, Gothmog, who, if you don't know, he's the really ugly orc in the battle at Minas Tirith. Like, awesome model. He got a new one, but then you look at his orc buddy and you're like, oh, that's kind of sketchy. So, that's a little bit not ideal. And then some of the models you just can't really find realistically. Like, if we sort to like Harad or the Serpent Horde, right? Like, this stuff right here, like Serpent Riders, these are really good models. Like they're good units in the game, but it's like, okay, $40 for two of them. They're crazy old. They're probably, oh, they're metal. And I need a lot of these, but I can't get them. So what so the cool thing about this is the community is very open to 3D prints because you essentially have to. Like, if I need 10 Serpent Riders and they're sold out everywhere and it's $40 for two of them, like that's the only option, essentially, right? One issue with this is they keep raising the prices on this stuff. It's 20 years old. It's like, really? A 20-year-old model you're gonna raise the price on? Like, not too long ago, these 9 Nazgul on foot, I think they were like $40, and now they're $92. Like, come on, GW. Like, what are you doing? I don't know if it says the year they were made, and their resin even. It's like there's some unfortunate stuff with GW involved. But I will say the rules don't change all the time. Like it's such a solid rule set, and I think they're aware enough to not mess with it too hard. Like they add a supplement every year or two that adds new units, and like they're called Legendary Legions, which is like thematic armies that are really cool. They don't mess with the core system too hard. They've rarely done points changes. Like some of these miniatures you literally can't get without 3D printing, but there's a lot of sites out there of people who have made their own sculpts and sell them like on Etsy and stuff. So check that out if you can. Long-term support, I would be a little bit concerned about GW suddenly dropping support of this game. Like I obviously don't know how it works with like their licensing and stuff like that, like how long they're able to sell Lord of the Rings stuff, but that's always a risk, right? Like this is not their primary, property that they're selling. And I mean, this is crazy. $65 for 10 of these guys. Or is it 12? Yeah. And the thing is, like, these guys are like 5 points, and you play like 700-point games, so you need a ton of this. Yeah, that's the main issue. But like, that's kind of a niche army, right? But if you get like the Mordor battle host and stuff, like this is a relatively good deal. Like you can get it for cheaper on Amazon and stuff. Um, Community, oh my God, everyone has been so welcoming and nice. Like, even to noobs, and they're open to 3D printing. Like, there's YouTubers that are really cool. It's a worldwide community. Like, there's people playing in the US and England and Australia, and they talk all the time, and it's just cool. Balance, I think this game is actually very well balanced. Like, there's a couple heroes that are probably a little bit overtuned, but I think that's like intentional because, like, for instance, like Azog, who, if you don't know, he's like the main villain in the Hobbit movies. Like, he is a very strong hero. Or like, specifically his son Bolg is like ridiculously strong. But then the armies that you could take them in, their units are like not as good, right? So that kind of balances it out. And I'm not aware of anything that's like breaking the game, and it's been out for 20 years and they rarely, like, I think I've only seen one points update ever. I haven't been in the game as long as some people, but like that's pretty good. This is bulk, by the way. Um, yeah, no apps or anything, but list builders definitely out there. So where am I gonna put MESBG? Well, I think I'm gonna put it in A with Marvel Crisis Protocol because of the gameplay. And because like there's just something about that game that just, like, no matter who you're playing against, like obviously skill matters, right? Like it's a huge factor. But like you always feel like you're in it, because you could always win a fight. and that's just so cool. And it's unique. Like none of these other games have combat systems like that. All right, last one I've played. It's probably going to be a quick one, but it's Warcry. So Warcry, if you don't know, is kind of like a skirmish version of Age of Sigmar. Like you have like smaller war bands of characters. They're kind of like each character in your war band is kind of like a named dude. There's like a ton of these war bands. I'm trying to find the one that I'm familiar with. It's in the like starter box. I hope they still sell it. Here they are. So, I bought into Warcry when it first came out. There's this, launch box. There's the Iron Golems versus the Untamed Beasts, and a bunch of cool terrain, book, like entirely different rules to Age of Sigmar. Like there were little faction abilities, and you know, characters did a ton of damage. Stuff died quickly. Like it was meant to be played quickly, right, on a small board. And I like joined a league. I was playing it. I had my Stormcast Eternals in their warband. It was a good time. But COVID hit, like literally, like this is what I was playing when lockdown happened, and it kind of died for me. Like my local community died. Warcry is obviously still a thing, but it's not as big anymore. Like I think the miniatures are amazing. Like look at this. This is the first set of Warcry stuff. And then you look at stuff like this for the Seraphon or the Lizardmen, it's like Chameleon Skinks. I'm down. Like this is the kind of Warhammer stuff I can get behind, right? It's like these smaller war bands of awesome models. I don't need an entire army to play it. Like $62 is not horrible. Like, it's still pretty expensive for 12 guys or whatever, but it's not like ridiculous. But again, there's still a core book that's $52. You need the board. Like, I'm going on this like tangent again or rant, but like Warhammer, you need so much random stuff to like play the game. Like I guess this is the newest starter set. Is that the newest one? See, then there's like a compendium that's $45. Like honestly, like I haven't been keeping up with Warcry, right? So I don't know exactly what I need to like play the game. It's like, do I just need the core book? Because I remember when I played back in the day, there were these little like twist cards I needed, but now it's like, do I need that stuff? Like, I don't know. And that's the issue, right? It's like, I literally don't even know what I need to play the game, let alone spend all this money on it. So, this is a little bit quicker one because I don't actively play it. I did enjoy it when I played it. Like they come out with specific characters for it and stuff, which is pretty cool. Um, where should I put it? I like it as like a launching point for Age of Sigmar. Although there's this new thing in Sigmar called Spearhead, where you just buy one of the starter boxes and you're essentially like good to play. That's still like more of a financial commitment. One of the main issues with Warcry would be like finding people to play with, I would think. But I think it would be perfect to like play with your kids or something because it's pretty simple and you lots of stuff dies. So that is going to be the end of it. Warhammer 40K at the bottom. I honestly didn't plan that. That's just I don't know. I've been burnt by it. So honestly, I need to decide if I like Middle Earth strategy battle game or Marvel Crisis Protocol better. It's honestly tough for me. Like Marvel Crisis Protocol is my favorite skirmish game, and Middle Earth is my favorite like army game, like army based game, right? But Middle Earth is not on the same scale as like Age of Sigmar 40K or Horus Heresy. Like you still have a lot of units, but it's not nearly as many, right? I've painted a lot more Marvel Crisis Protocol. But I'm scheduled to play at a Middle Earth tournament coming up. I don't know. I might just leave them both in A because they're not perfect, you know? Like neither of them, like they both have issues, but not huge issues. Yeah, I might just leave it. Nothing in S, nothing in D. Like, you know, nothing's awful to play. Like if you play Warhammer 40K, that's great. It's just not for me right now, you know? And I don't want to give the edge to one of these over the other. Like I think some of this could be stretched out a little bit, but hey, here we go. So just to recap from bottom to top, I have Warhammer 40K, Song of Ice and Fire, Horus Heresy, Star Wars Armada, Warcry, Star Wars Legion, Warhammer Age of Sigmar, Star Wars Shatterpoint, Marvel Crisis Protocol, and Middle Earth Strategy Battle Game. So there it is. There's the tier list. Uh, I hope this was helpful to some people, or at least insightful. Um, I've done a lot of this stuff. Uh, please let me know in the comments what you think. Like which miniatures game is your favorite? You know, like am I wrong about 40K? Is 40K better nowadays? Like that'd be great, and it'd be fun to play my Dark Angels again. Like I still have them. Um, yeah, but if you've never tried Middle Earth Strategy Battle Game, highly recommend it. Marvel Crisis Protocol is a little bit easier to get into, so you could definitely try that. So yeah, here it is. So please, subscribe if you can. That helps me out a ton. And if you could check out that buy me a coffee thing, that would be really cool as well. So thanks for watching, everybody. I truly appreciate it. And I will see you in the next video. So till then, have a good one.